Let's open up the Black Series Archive 6-inch figure of Grand Moff Tarkin. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. We're well into 2025 and one of my New Year's resolutions is to actually go through and open up the figures that I buy with the intention to open rather than storing them away to do it later. I really want to dive in and open up the figures that I've been hoarding for too long, and I know that I really want to add them to my loose collection. A little while ago, probably a year or so ago, I picked up quite a few of the Black Series Archive reissue figures with the intention of opening them up because they were clearance. They've got a little bit of shelf wear and I kind of stored them away and forgot about them, and I really shouldn't be doing that. So I'm going to dive in and open them all up so I can finally get them on a display. So of course we've got Grand Moff Tarkin here to open up today with this really cool Interrogation Droid figure as well. So can't wait to get him out and check out the details. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, we'll get the figures out, we'll check out the articulation, the details, all of that fun stuff. But first, let's take a quick look at the backing card. The packaging design for the Black Series Archive line consists of a rectangular cardboard backing card and a large, clear, mostly rectangular front bubble. Keeping with the Black Series packaging design, we've got black across the top and down the left side. We've got the Star Wars Black Series logo here on the top right, a cutout hanger, and also an angular cutout along that left edge, which is mirrored by a cut-off angle on the front bubble. The character name is printed down the side in large, easy-to-read font, Grand Moff Tarkin, and behind the figure we have a light grey panel which extends across to the right hand side where we can see the archive line title there. We also have the Hasbro logo just down here on the side as well. The light grey really helps show some of the details, particularly on these darker coloured characters here. We have a cardboard insert in the front of the bubble with some nice black and white artwork of Grand Moff Tarkin in his iconic thinking pose with his arms crossed. We can see he doesn't come with too many accessories, just Grand Moff Tarkin himself and the Interrogation Droid from A New Hope. Moving on to the back, we've got that same insert art here, a little bit closer up, a little bit larger here, and we've got a little bit of information about the original figures. So of course the archive line are reissued figures. So the original Grand Moff Tarkin figure came out in 2018, and we can see the original box style pictured here. I really like that sort of nod to the history there in the black and red Black Series box era. We have a small asterisk here, and if we read down, it notes that this is no longer available, which I think is kind of cute there. We do have a blurb for Grand Moff Tarkin. I'll quickly read it. An ambitious, ruthless proponent of military power, Wilf Tarkin became a favorite of Emperor Palpatine and rose rapidly through the Imperial ranks. And that's repeated in a few different languages. The rest of the packaging is copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff. I do like the nod to the history of the figure, but of course I bought this one to open, so let's get him out and check out the details. So now I have the Grand Moff Tarkin figure and the Interrogation Droid accessory out of the packaging. I'm going to go over Grand Moff Tarkin first. So of course I have to reference the fact that this is of course the archive version of the figure, which is a reissue of the original 2018 figure. I don't own the original figure, so I won't be able to do a comparison. Generally speaking, when Hasbro does the archive figures, there is no updates to the tooling. It is simply a reissue. We can see that we have the older two-peg articulation style for the knees, but sometimes Hasbro is able to do the more modern photorealistic paint job, especially on the face. So I can't speak to whether this is an improvement over the original figure in terms of the paint work. I'm just going to be looking at this reissue version, and I have to say it looks really nice. So of course Grand Moff Tarkin was played incredibly well by Peter Cushing, sad no longer with us, but he has a very distinctive face, which I think really lifts this figure in terms of it sort of being interesting. He's such an important character in A New Hope. He's so iconic. Of course, we do see him in the digital form in Rogue One, so I guess you could add this figure to a Rogue One display if you really want to, but I'm going to be adding mine to A New Hope because of the Interrogation Droid accessory. But just, the detail on this is just really, really nice. I really like the sculpting for his face. He has such an angular face in terms of the cheekbones and the nose. Really well cast for an Imperial, kind of has that sort of look of superiority. And he's just so sort of cold, especially when just sort of casually blowing up Alderaan. Just such an important character for A New Hope. And I know that the Imperial tunics aren't the most interesting when it comes to action figures. You know, they do tend to look alike when you line them all up, but Tarkin is so recognizable. He's going to stand out if you line up all of your Imperial characters together. He's just so recognizable. So I just taking a moment to really look at the sculpting and the paintwork on this figure. I really do like the digital printing that we have here for the eyebrows and the eyes. Maybe a touch of color on the lips there as well. We've got just a little bit of a tiny sort of shiny spot here on the cheek. Maybe a tiny paint flaw that's just catching the light on certain angles. But in terms of the hair, we've got a really nice sculpting here. Again, very distinctive hairline. This is sculpted as part of the head, not a separate piece. So we've got very tidy paint line along that hairline. That's not a join. That's really nice and painted there. And we've got a pretty good sort of hair sculpting here. I can sort of see the way that the hair would be combed back. That's really nice. I don't know if it's just the shadows created by the depth of the sculpting or whether we have a little bit of a wash here. It's a little hard to tell, but a really nice color there. I think we might have the tiniest little bit of plastic here just on his jawline. Just a little bit of extra. Sometimes I notice that a little bit more common on the older figures. But we've just got just that tiny little bit there on the jawline. It's not really bothering me because I'm probably going to be having him facing forward there. But other than that, just that one tiny little sort of shiny patch on his cheek. But perfectly fine at this side. I really like the painting. Really nice hair job. So I'm going to go over the Imperial tunic here. Not as, you know, interesting as some other figures, but it is important and very iconic for Star Wars. Of course, it's based on sort of traditional military tunics here. So we've got him with his Imperial officer tunic. We've got his Grand Moff rank badge, 2 code cylinders on either side of the pockets there. They are painted in a silver. They're not shiny, glossy silver. It's a little bit more of a dull color. It's not really picking up the light, but they are there. Nice tidy paintwork on the rank badge. The reds are a little bit over the sculpting. When I look at that really up close, the blues are a little bit better. The one at the end, just a little bit higher in terms of the paint application. The yellows look nice and straight, which is good to see. We have silver here for the Imperial belt buckle and a silver dome off to the left-hand side of that belt buckle. Again, not a glossy silver. It's more like a brushed metal. Perhaps I would have preferred that to be more glossy. I feel like more of the modern figures have more of a sort of a shiny metallic finish to that. I don't know if his has perhaps got a slightly different finish to others on screen. As I say, sometimes going over action figures makes me want to sort of go back and watch the original sort of source material, the films and TV episodes, to really sort of pay really close attention to see if I can spot sort of similarities or potential differences with the costume details. But we can see we've got that iconic sort of Imperial stacked disc little detail there in the center of the belt. That belt goes all the way around. And the sculpting does include the 2 grooves on this Imperial belt, just along the top and the bottom, a little bit clearer to see on the back. Just along there and there, which is nice. So of course he's got those riding sort of style pants, the Jodhpur style pants that have the flared out on the hips. It's not a flaw with the figure. That is how the pants sit on these military style ones, because of course they are designed to fit in with the black glossy riding boots that we have here. We've got a little bit of a strap buckle design on the back of the boots, but other than that they are sort of featureless. They don't have straps or buckles around the ankles or anything like that. Just nice glossy black plastic there. We've got articulation in the ankles. We'll check that out. We've got some really nice details here in the tunic. Of course, we've got this front flap that folds over. We've got that little collar section stitched closed kind of on his. We don't really see anything there. The paintwork on this collar is a little bit high. You can just sort of see the paint goes up onto the neck. Not my favorite. Could be a little bit tighter there, but I know the necks on these figures are generally all one piece. But just a little bit on this side, it's a little bit more noticeable here under the chin. So perhaps I need to sort of just tilt his chin down a little bit to hide that little bit of a shame. We do have the articulation shown here. Sometimes when we have these tunics that come out over the shoulders, sometimes it can affect the articulation, but I think this one might be okay. It's a little bit bit more cut in higher. Doesn't extend out over the shoulder because we've got that little bit of a step, which is not my favorite, but I know that we do want to be able to move the arms around. I like the soft sort of fabric texture to the plastic on this one as well. We can see that on the pants. The pants have a little bit more of a sort of a hard plastic gloss in places, whereas the tunic at the top has more of a sort of a soft matte, almost sort of satin finish to it there. I do like the fact that we've got sort of the seam lines visible. We can see there are two on the jacket, one sort of down the front, one down the back. This arm's just a little bit out of alignment. You can see it lining up there. And we've also got sort of the running seams down the back, which start at the shoulders and run down to the back of the tunic there. Just a little bit of wrinkling and stuff like that. Of course, Imperials want to keep their uniforms looking very sharp, very sort of tidy, not too wrinkled, but of course they are going to wrinkle a little bit during wear and the way that they sit on the body. So I like the fact that we've got all of this kind of detail work there in the sculpting. And of course we've got lots of wrinkles around the knees where those sort of baggier pants are tucked in. So overall, cool sculpting, nothing terribly new or exciting. We were very familiar with Imperial tunics by now. The rank badge, I feel like perhaps could be painted just a tiny bit tidier. And the silvers are just a little bit more of a flatter finish than perhaps I would personally prefer, but that's just me. So overall, he looks pretty cool. Not too much in terms of what I would, you can't really sort of bling them up, can you? One point of note here, he does have an extended trigger finger here in terms of the sculpting. I don't really think of Tarkin as pointing. I think of that as more of Vader's thing, especially in A New Hope. And especially if we want to do sort of a pose like depicted on that cardboard insert where he has his arms crossed, we can't sort of crook his finger down. He's going to be pointing. So we can't quite exactly replicate that pose from the box, but we do have some good articulation that we can see there on the back of the hand. But yes, he doesn't have a blaster rifle or blaster pistol to hold, so we don't really need this finger extended. But of course, the figures aren't always just for replicating the scenes that we see on screen. Perhaps you want to sort of do a little bit more sort of, expanded universe, behind the scenes sort of things. Perhaps he's got a blaster pistol that you can borrow from another figure, do some cool photos, have him with stormtroopers and other officers or something like that. So we do have that functionality, but I don't have an accessory, included with him to really test that out. So it's going to be completely up to what accessory you choose to potentially put in his hand as to how well that's going to fit. He also just has the classic sort of C grip in his other hand. I kind of wished for some figures that don't come with accessories that Hasbro would just sculpt a little bit more of a relaxed hand, because they don't really need to be holding lightsabers or battle staffs or anything like that. I think for Tarkin, he just doesn't need this hand gripped like that, but that's just me. I do tend to try and sort of just recreate the films and scenes that we see the characters in, rather than sort of getting creative with toy photography. I do admire it, but I'm not very good at it. I just pose my figures with the accessories they come with. So let's quickly go over the articulation of the character, and then we'll check out the accessory interrogation droid over there. So it seems correct that Imperials wouldn't really look sort of too different. I think of them as sort of having quite a high eye line. Though of course he does look down to Leia, because Leia, being portrayed by Carrie Fisher, is a lot shorter than Tarkin. Because of the collar sculpting, his neck is sort of hitting there. I can't get him to look too far down, but he also doesn't look back either. I can get him to about there, and something just in the back here, I don't know if it's the way the hair is sculpted, he just doesn't tip his head back far, but he can tip side to side, a little bit squeaky. But it's not free flowing. He's got a little bit of resistance there, but it's not hard to turn. We'll check out his arms. So if I swivel them up, we can get to this kind of angle. The tunic is hitting straight there, so I'm not going to get that any more higher up. But in terms of out to the side, yeah, the cut of that tunic is not stopping the arms from coming all the way up. So if we can get him into a straight armed pose there, nice and easy, swinging them around. So he's probably not going to be too sort of wild in terms of the poses that I'm going to do, but let's see if I can kind of get a little bit of a crossed arm sort of thinking pose here. So I can get his elbows quite tight into the body, which is generally useful if you want them to do a two-handed weapon pose for lightsabers, say. But his elbow only comes to about here. I can't get that to come up any higher. It is completely hitting here. So if I'm going to pull his arm across his body, I can't fold it up to kind of get him to sort of do the thinking pose from the actual box. That's as high as I'm going to get. He can kind of point out, but I can't get it close to the body. He's just going to sort of crows there. Yeah. Of course, you know, not all figures are going to be able to do everything humans can do because of the restrictions of plastic, but it is a bit of a shame because that's like the one pose that I'd probably do. I know for certain Imperials, for characters, say like Thrawn, you can kind of do a little bit of a carrying the arms behind the back type pose. That kind of works, in which case we've got a little bit of an awkward sort of posing here on the elbows. You can really see the articulation there, but the hands are hidden, so you don't have those sort of awkward accessory holding grasps there. And those arms do rotate around quite nicely. We can rotate at the wrists. We can see that we have articulation that's going to allow us to kind of move that hand front and back a little bit. It's kind of tight, but there is a bit of articulation there. You can see that point showing up there a little bit. Sometimes with these tunic sleeves, they do restrict the amount that the hands can actually move. This one is a front and back one. You can see there, and I should be able to sort of show that on the back of the hand there as well. Not a lot of movement. He also doesn't have any accessories to hold, so it's not as important there. So let's test out his waist. Wow, that's tight. Okay, he doesn't really want to turn to the side very much at all. We've got almost no front and back. It's not really going to look any different technically. There's a tiny amount of sort of rocking I can do there, but the Imperial belts sit quite high. I was kind of sure that this sort of wide belt was really going to stop us from a front and back sort of rocking there. Very, very tight to bring him to the side. Personally, because the Imperial tunics have such defined lines running down the front, as soon as you turn it, it starts to look weird or a bit wrong. So I personally don't need this side-to-side articulation, but then that is just me as one collector. I know other fans do want that. It's very tight. He does hold it. He's not snapping back to middle, so that's something. Now, of course, because the tunics extend down below the top of the hips, we've got these side splits. So the bottom of the tunic is made from that slightly flexible plastic. But I have to say, you can kind of see the cross-section here, especially where the tunic flap overlaps. It's very thick. It's not really giving me that much to work with. I don't know that this is necessarily going to add a lot more to the flexibility here. It's taking a lot to sort of pull that a little bit more in the back, but that's quite a thick cross section for this plastic here. We've got a slight circle top to try and avoid the plastic split from traveling up further, though that doesn't always stop it. This one here, that's actually more of a rectangular shape at the top of the split. Don't know if I trust that one quite as much. Again, very tight. Peeking in underneath the tunic, we can see that we've got that sort of swivel articulation point at the top of the thigh on both legs. And it is nicely hidden under the length of the tunic. Sometimes it hits just below and it's a little bit obvious. I'm not sure that we're really going to get that much in the way of sort of being able to move his legs around. That's about as high as I'm going to get there before that's really stressing on at that point, which is, you know, reasonable height there. Other side. It's really creaking. I could get to about there and it's just not going to let me go up any higher. And the swiveling, very tight. Of course, this is a slightly older figure. It's tight, but I can get there. You can kind of see I'm able to swivel them around nice and easy. And let's test out these knees. Now, I do mention it often, I don't like these style of knee articulations. I know it gives us an increased flexibility, but I don't like the fact that it just sort of really cuts up the knee detail. And then we've got the sort of floating kneecap and these 2 points, and I do find them very tight. We've got a very high kick there, but I do not like the way that this peg is cutting through the peak on the pants there. We've just got this big hole that's just sort of hiding there. Now, of course, because he doesn't have too much busy detail here, the kneecaps are kind of hidden by the wrinkles in the pants, but But we also don't have detail to sort of really completely obscure it. We've just got plain pants. So the kneecaps on this one are just kind of standing out to me a little bit. I would prefer the more modern style where we sort of have the drape of the pants hanging low, which kind of almost joins the pants just to the boots, and then all of the articulation in the back. You can see just how much of that sort of peg that we get in the back, that sort of section there. It's just so big. It just really draws the eye, and I just don't like the way it looks from the front. I know it's kind of on the underside when we're actually posing them like that. I'm just very glad that Hasbro has moved away from that sort of articulation style. This one's a little bit on the looser side. I can kind of swing this one around. This one's stiff. I'm going to move the whole leg. This one I feel like I'm swinging the knee. It's kind of easy. So let's test out the ankles. It's fairly smooth. It's not tight. It's not providing too much resistance. I can roll them to the side as well. You can kind of see, you can get sort of an ankle roll there. Not too tight, not floppy either, because for me, I'm just going to be standing him in pretty much a straight upwards. I can really feel that knee being kind of a bit loose. That's interesting. Trying to get him just into a pose. He stands pretty well. Of course, the Imperial Officer boots have a nice flat base to them. Pretty standard. They've probably used across many figures. And I will work on the pose. Unfortunately, he's just looking a little bit awkward because I don't have anything to put in his hands, while his hands do look like they are designed to hold something, which is a real shame. But in terms of the actual sculpting, I don't think I could really improve much here. Just that silver and the knees are my main points. But of course, I think one of the main points of Tarkin is his expression, and I think that they did really well there for this particular figure. So he's just going to lie down there in the back while we quickly take a look at the interrogation droid. So it was a little bit hidden in the packaging, but it has a really fun, clear stand. And I have to say, for the size of the actual droid up here, I was expecting a wider part of the base here. I've seen much wider ones for the likes of, Watto and other characters that need to be suspended. That's a really narrow base. I know the center of gravity is all quite tight. It's not extended. But something that was not really obvious is it's actually articulated. It is attached on a ball-shaped mount to the base. I thought perhaps I'd be able to sort of pull it off, and while I assume that I could if I wanted to, perhaps you want to sort of suspend it on sort of fishing line or nylon, a string or something like that, and you would probably be able to pull that out. I'm not game enough. I don't want to damage this attachment point, but I was actually quite surprised at how sturdy it is. You can see I can sort of tip it on that articulation point, and it is actually standing up. Now, how well that's going to stand up if there's any sort of knocks or shutters to your display surface, I don't quite want to test that out, but I was quite surprised at how well balanced it is, considering how narrow that base is. Of course, it's nice and clear, trying to be sort of the illusion of hovering, so I think that the stand does really well in that regard. So let's look at all of the details on this. So doing a little bit of a test on all of these sort of attachments, the interrogation sort of arms here. They are all rubbery in some respects. They're all a little bit flexible, and giving them a quick little test, they don't want to move. These feel fixed in. And considering they're rubbery, it can be really hard. You're generally just sort of twisting like if I show on this one, you'll just turn it. You're not actually turning it at the base. So I'm not really going to wrench them around. This one here, I can't make it point. I'm just actually wobbling the rubbery plastic rather than articulating it. So that might be a bother for some people. Perhaps they want to sort of articulate the arms like FX7 or something like that and do slightly different poses. This one is sort of pointing forward, which is nice. The rest of them are kind of pointing more upwards. Nice shiny silver here, which is kind of interesting compared to the very matte silver of Tarkin's buckle. You can kind of see just how different they look in terms of the way they're catching the light. I think that that's kind of interesting there. But of course, the interrogation droid has so much surface detail. There's so much going on. Lots of raised lines. We've got little recessed dots, raised dots, lots of different details here, different panels. Some of them kind of remind me of classic astromechs with these sort of cut out rectangular panels here. Lots of line work. So let's just look at the colors. So the whole thing is black with a silver, that sort of shiny metallic silver for the sort of accessory parts extruding from it there. And the rest of the details look like we just have silver in the same color as the accessory parts and a few red dots, which look like they are painted reasonably well. We've got a large red dot on the under surface. We've got a little red dot that's just painted here. It's actually not got any sculpting underneath it. That's just a flat red painted dot. Then we've got 2 dots here which are recessed, a couple of dots here which are raised, and we've got like tiny little red dots. There's just little red dots all over it. And then of course we've got a lot of silver along the lines, and just looking all over it, the silver looks really well applied to match up with the sculpting. That's one of my biggest sort of things when there's a lot of fine detail. I really want the paint to match up to the sculpting of the figure underneath. I like the texture and sort of the join between the 2 hemispheres. There's a texture in there. It's probably really hard to show. It might take some close-up photography to really show the details of this one. I know technically it's accessory, but then it's also kind of like its own character, like probe droids, you know, they generally sort of get their own packaging. It's kind of funny that, yeah, it's just not mentioned on the packaging because I think it's a really integral part. It sort of really sells this kind of duo as a set, you know, because Tarkin just doesn't have any of his other sort of accessories or anything to go with it. Silver printing here that's nice and flat. No detail behind that one. It's really catching the light. It's quite nice, but running my finger over, I can see just the dots and everything are just really nicely lined up, which is really nice. I'm just sort of looking all over at the lines, and I really can't find a spot that's really bothering me because it's like misaligned or anything like that. Really nice. Sometimes it's really hard because, you know, it's a 3D, it's a circle, but it's packaged facing forward. You don't really know what the back of it is going to look like. A little bit plain here in the back section here, but of course Hasbro just has to sort of go on what was made for on screen. So I guess just not as much detail there on the back of the droid. We don't really see it from the back so much. On screen, it's definitely sort of the focal point is the front of it there, and that's probably how I'm going to display it, facing forward. Really nice detail there on the front. A little bit of a shame these arms don't move, but we don't really see them move on screen either. Just kind of hovers forward menacingly with the sort of arm extended there. Just really nice paint and detail. Really nice. I can't imagine that I would change anything about this. I'm just surprised that the base is not wider. That was just kind of a little bit of a surprised that it is actually quite well balanced, and I don't know if you'd necessarily need to sort of articulate it around, but I guess that is a fairly standard attachment point, and it just stands up really nice. So we've got Tarkin and the interrogation droid from A New Hope. Gonna have to work on Tarkin's pose though. His hands just look like he wants to hold a blaster rifle, and sadly he doesn't have anything. So I might adopt a bit more of a Thrawn pose and put his arms behind him, because I cannot unfortunately raise his arm up in order to do that sort of classic sort of thinking pose where he's sort of resting more of his sort of knuckle under his chin a little bit there. But overall, really cool figures. Of course, despite being such a central character for A New Hope, it's unlikely that Hasbro will reissue this in a retooled manner in the foreseeable future. You know, there are so many characters that have not been made in the Black Series at all, so it's not likely to see a character like this being retooled when they have already reissued this one. So perhaps we'll have to wait many years before we finally get a sort of a re-updated sort of version in terms of the sculpting and stuff like that. So this is what we have for Grand Moff Tarkin for now, and I think he's fine. There's nothing really that's really sticking out in terms of any sort of major things with the paintwork. Just that little bit of a wobble around the neck, that shiny patch. The hands, I guess if you really wanted to, if you're brave, you could possibly remove the hands and swap them with someone else's, but pretty much all Star Wars figures have some grip for an accessory, so I don't know that you'd really have much luck trying to sort of update his hands into something else. But yeah, he stands well enough. He's nice and sturdy. Just wish I could do something else with his hands there. But overall, really fun, and he's been sitting in his packaging for far too long. Really happy to finally get him out, get him on display, and get him on my Black Series shelf, because he looks really cool and he's such an important character. So finally knocking off my to-do list in terms of opening up my Black Series figures. So check one down. Don't know how many more to go, but I'm going to be working my way through that list as fast as I can. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently opened up the Lando Calrissian Skiff Guard figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.